Welcome back to What's Up Doctor. I'm Dr. Michael Cohen, and today we have a very special episode with Dan Raz, who's a journalist and also a father. And the subject of today's video is parental burnout. So I'll start with you, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Yes, I think just a quick intro to this video is that I saw your last video on burnout and it really interested me. And I remember watching it, and a few days later, it kind of just played on my mind, and I thought about it. And then I thought, I've been burnt out as well, and I don't have a very demanding job. And I remember your video. You said that doctors and teachers, social workers, people that give of themselves can get burnt out. And then I thought, there must be a thing called parental burnt out, because that's the ultimate. We give of ourselves all the time. It's 24/7. It's relentless. They always say that mums don't get a day off. So I thought about it, and it really is a thing, parental burnout. And I thought it'd be great if we could discuss it, and if you could give us some tips.
Well, with pleasure. I think you can give me some tips.
I don't think so. I present the problem. I come with the problem, is that life is very stressful anyway, as you say. But I see. I've got 3 children, and I see people that are just having babies now at my job at work, and I see sometimes that they're really tired, and I see them come into the office and like, "How are you?" And they're like, "Oh well, my kid woke up at 4 a.m, and then again at 6." And then there they are, and they're having to go through the normal workday like myself, go to meetings and pretend that everything's okay when really they're absolutely exhausted.
Right.
And I remember when I had my kids, I remember saying to my brothers, "Wow, it's really it tests you on emotionally, physically, and mentally. It's a really challenging thing to be a parent." And so I wondered what you thought about that. My first question is really, do you think that there's too much expectation on new parents today?
Well, I think, thanks for that intro. I think that basically there's a lot of expectation of parents by themselves, on themselves. So I think people's expectations today are very high, and we can go into what drives that if you like. But I think that in general, a lot of parents today are struggling because they are trying to be the perfect parent. I think the aim should be for someone to be a good enough parent, and I don't say that lightly. It's not easy to be a good enough parent, and as you say, you've got 3 kids, but even someone having 1 kid, and if they're having to wake up in the middle of the night multiple times, may or may not get back to sleep, may not get good quality sleep, got to get up, prepare things for the day, for the family, go to work, drop the kid off. If the kid's unwell, for goodness sake, overnight, it could be really tough. So on the one hand, it's hard enough to do that just at a basic safe level of parenting, let's say. And in addition to that, people today are more and more, I think, judging of themselves, partly because of what is considered the norm, and how that's derived is probably somewhat from social media. And I think also that there's the expectations that the child has on the parent. So obviously, depending on what age, when it's a young baby, there's not much thinking going on there. But again, I will go back to a degree to what modern life entails, and I think that a lot of it is very much about parents having to do this and do that and do this and do that. And not to hark on about our youth, but when we were younger, we were very much into entertaining ourselves with, I think, pretty healthy activities. So being outdoors, bicycles, having close friendships with people in the neighborhood. And there were some computer games when we were children, but it was really a very, very minor thing. And today it's a very significant thing, and we can get onto the subject of devices. But I'm taking your question a little bit far at the moment. But
no, it's fine. And so, there's actually what you said at the beginning is that I remember reading somewhere that being a parent, your life can, if you have one kid, two kids, it doesn't really matter, but your life can sort of devolve into tragicomedy, where you are like a taxi, then you've got to make dinner, and then you forgot to do one thing, but it's the one thing you needed to do. So it can be, and your child will remind you of that as well.
Right.
Dad, you forgot to do that. My next question is basically, have you had, because it is not really spoken about directly, although I get a feeling it's huge, do you have patients that come into your clinic or come to see you and they're experiencing parental burnout and they don't know it?
Well, this was one of them. But in seriousness, I think so, yeah, very much so. And it's interesting that you bring up this subject of, and the name parental burnout, the title parental burnout, because no one's ever come in here and said, oh, I've got parental burnout. People have said, I'm feeling burned out at work, whatever. Nobody's ever come to see me and said, I've got parental burnout. But it's very clear when you talk to them, you can see that they are trying their best as a parent and feeling like they're failing, even if they're doing, in my opinion, a pretty damn good job. And
they feel like they're failing.
That's the thing. It's to feel. It's not only that they're tired and exhausted, overwhelmed, which are parts of the definition of what burnout is, and perhaps not functioning as well as they could, but they also feel like they are failing in some way. They feel like they should be better, and that word "should" is it's loaded with expectation. Instead of a person telling themselves, "Oh, I'm doing a good enough job, right? I'm providing a roof over their head for my family, food on the table. I am trying my best to be emotionally available, to educate wherever I can." You're doing a lot of things, probably a lot more than people used to do in the past for various reasons, which we can get into as well. And at the same time, they're feeling like they're failing, and that's a huge stress because it's like one of those. It's that expression that you can do. The how is easy when you have the why, but if you feel like you're not doing so well, then it makes everything much more heavy. Instead of it being a pleasure, it becomes a chore.
So are these parents too hard on themselves? The expectations are too high from themselves?
I think so. I think it's coming from society. It's coming from what they see in social media. It's coming from what their children expect, even though their children really don't know. They just, they see the outside of other people's lives in the same way that we do. And that can translate into, oh, why are you not doing this for me? Why have I not got that? Why have, I heard a story just the other day of a child in a shop who the mother was buying them an expensive smartphone. The kid was, I think, 9 years old, and the mother had to pay in installments for this phone. She couldn't afford it, but she was paying, what was amounted to over $1,000 for a telephone. Now, that might be extreme, and I'm sure not everybody does that, but it's not that unusual today for children to have ridiculously overpriced items, because that's what makes them feel on par with their other friends at school. So there is this race, this competition going on
from outside,
and it's putting parents under huge pressures, because which parent wants to be the one who leaves their kid as the only child in class without a pair of trainers that have a good brand on, for example. So I think that's another thing that adds to it for sure.
So we know parental burnout is a thing. Can you just what are the symptoms of this, or what is it very similar to normal burnout, I gather, and what would be the coping mechanisms? Could you suggest to the parents?
Well, I think that we sort of mentioned or have alluded to what the symptoms are. The symptoms are feeling exhausted mentally, physically, feeling overwhelmed, feeling like you're not coping, and also feeling low in oneself and feeling someone's you're at the end of your tether.
I've also read that some parents can also feel distance from their children. It becomes
I think you can probably feel both distance from your children, feel distance from your partner, and feel distance from yourself. And if you're asking what can be done, what is the solution to this? I mean, I think you have to look at this on different levels. So on the one hand, I think awareness of this in society needs to be higher, or just there needs to be an awareness. I think that we are shooting ourselves in the foot or the feet as a society if we think that the amount of comparisons that happen as a result of social media, for example, is in any way good for family life. It's very destructive. I think that putting limits, for example, on the use of devices and technology would be very helpful, going back to perhaps more traditional things like outdoor play or even indoor play, playing with physical games, playing with kids actually meeting each other. I think, for example, the pandemic, I think, hasn't helped at all. I think a lot of kids have become quite nervous to meet other children and go out. And I see this and I hear this. So anything that encourages physical sports, going out with one another, those things are good. I think the family spending time together as a family and without the distractions and expectations that come from the technologies. And I've seen, everyone I know has got a story of seeing families sitting at a dinner table in a restaurant or even in the house, and each person being on a phone instead of talking with one another, instead of communicating with one another. And then that puts each person in their own zone. So they're not actually mentally present with one another. They may be physically at the same table, but they might as well be at 4 different tables, for example. And so there's that. And I think there's also a matter of what we spoke about before, which is the expectation. So I think a parent needs to know that they need to be good enough and not super parents. And again, this comes down to how much information there is out there about what is needed to be the perfect parent, how you can avoid anything going wrong with your child, how and that's the amount of information that people need to digest and use is in itself tiring.
So I'd like to. It's great. The great tips for the family, and I totally agree. And I've actually experienced this in my own life of going outside with the children. These are the great moments, and we talked before that. I really feel that they call them pauses. That life is made in pauses, and the pauses. I mean that the time of just folding a t-shirt, something as simple as folding a t-shirt, some towels with your child, or going outside to the garden to just look at a plant or something that's very small, may seem completely irrelevant, not significant. It can be like the best moment of your day, and it might be their best moment as well. They just don't know it. So, but I wanted to ask you about the parents, because you talked about how, say, the parents are overwhelmed, the parents are stressed. What could they do to help themselves? We kind of touched on it, but is it diet, exercise, like you said, not for the child, I'm talking about the parent now, How can a parent make themselves happier, and what effect will that have on you spoke about it before, happier parents?
Right. So I think there's a lot of things there to talk about on the subject of some of the more simple things to talk about are diet and exercise. So just making sure that one looks after oneself by eating healthily, by not overeating, not undereating, not living on coffee and biscuits all day. Actually trying to take some time to prepare things.
Or leftover children's meals.
It would probably be better the other way. If the children were eating the leftover adult meals, they would probably be eating better overall. I think that so one thing is about self-care, which means devoting a bit of time, taking a deep breath in, devoting time to oneself, to how we eat, making sure we get some exercise, even if it just means going for a walk. And those things can also be combined. So, after a meal, it might be nice if families try to get into the habit of going for a walk together. It's good for a person both on a physiological level. It keeps your blood sugar low, rather than it spiking straight after a meal. And also it can be a social activity for the parents and the children. I also think that parents might be sometimes a little bit too timid in how they approach children. Like when they see that a child gets upset because they're not getting their way or doing what they want to do. So there's a tendency perhaps to try and give the child what the child says that they want and what they think that they need, rather than coaxing them out of it gently, with love, with a smile, with a joke, and actually showing them something else. So, they might say, oh, I don't want to come out for a walk. And you might say, okay, maybe not, but you might go give them a little tickle, give them a hug, and just say, we're just going somewhere, to do something, or maybe we'll take a ball with us. Get to be a little bit creative, to actually get children to come out of themselves, and also to connect a bit more with one's own inner child. So,
my next question.
Well, if you think about how children experience the world, it's very unfiltered. So they just look around them. They're curious by things like everything, especially when they're very young. They're looking at things. They're like, oh, what's this? What's that?
Honesty there as well.
It's very straightforward. They could be miserable one second and then smiling and laughing the next, and there's no connection one or the other. And so they're very present in the moment. And I think that it can help us as adults also to be a little bit not childish but childlike with our children. Yes. So to actually enter into their world, and not just to be the distant adult sitting. It's like, children should be seen and not heard or anything like that. Very much, to join in their play, and also for us to be in that moment as well.
The moment of playing like a child. So that brings me to my last question is about, I know that your favourite book is Little Prince. One of your favourite books. Okay. Can you tell us why and how it connects to this idea of the inner child? And before you answer that, I would just say, as myself, as playing with my own children, I always find that the times that I kind of play with my children and I lose myself in the play, and then you don't realise, oh wow, 10 minutes ago we better make dinner. They're also great times as well, because you really are not being a dad playing with a child, you're literally being like a friend playing with a child. So, could you just tell us why that book spoke to you? And when did you read it, by the way?
I've read it many times. Probably the first time. First time I think I read it when I was about 21. I just travelled in Europe and I met somebody who gave me this quote, and they said, "What is truly important is invisible to the eye." And that really spoke to me, and I read the book quite a few times, and many beautiful quotes in it. And really just reading it makes you feel a little bit like a child. You see the world through these much simpler, more honest, as you said, eyes. And I recommend it for anybody. I think both for children and adults, everyone should read this book many times. You should keep it by your bed. And what was the thing that got to me about it? That for children, without going into every chapter or story within it, it's very much the idea of remembering or starting to put yourself back in the place of how you were when you were a child, when things were in some way just unpolluted. So in one of the sentences, for example, he says, adults never ask you when they meet somebody else. They never say they never say, what color do you like? What's your favorite smell? Things like that. They say, how much money do you make? What job do you have? Etc. etc. What did your father do? And by this, they think they know you. And this book is very much about getting people to connect to the more emotional side of things, to be able to say, when you meet somebody, tell me really about you, without being, without prying too much. And I think that, I think there is some connection with how we can avoid burnout just by ourselves becoming a little bit more present in what's going on, and not just thinking about how we have written some narrative in our heads about the way things are supposed to be.
Right. So we've touched on a lot of topics there. I think there's the expectations at the beginning that we put on ourselves as parents, which may go back to so many things. Could go to your own conditioning, could go to your own upbringing, could be like you're trying to compensate for your own upbringing, or trying to be the best parent you can be. We've covered that parental burnout is a thing. That for recognizing awareness, be it get in touch with your inner child, creating moments, pauses, as I say, or moments, being in the moment. And my last point was just really I find that reading books. I remember a phrase once that reading a book to a child, it brings in a different voice into the house. I find that sometimes, and this comes at different ages, you end up as a parent almost barking orders at your child, like, get ready for school. There's always something to do. Brush your teeth. Get ready, and you can kind of you sit down and you read a book. You enter a third voice, and it's not your voice, and you read into the child. And I also think that's another great moment, and I really hope that everyone still reads to their children before bed, because it's one of my favourite moments.
I think that's a very wise and beautiful sentiment, and I hope that whoever's watching this will take that very seriously. It's certainly something I have an experience with as well, both having been read to and reading to. And I think it's a very intimate moment with a child that they treasure, really treasure. Both the parent and the child treasure this. So if the child says they want to play a video game when they go to sleep, gently tell them no and start reading to them. And it can be mesmerizing, truly. And I think good for both parent and child.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
So if you enjoyed that episode, or even if you didn't, write some comments below, please. Click the subscribe button, pass this on to other friends, family, whoever, and click the bell for notifications for more videos. I really want to make this channel work. I want it to spread, so I very much appreciate your support just by doing those very simple things. Take care until next time.